But first, let me begin by clarifying the purpose of nonviolent communication. Its purpose is to help you to do what you already know how to do. Now, why do we need to learn something today that you already know how to do? Because sometimes we forget to do this. We forget because we've been educated to forget. Now, what is it that I'm talking about that we already know how to do? The purpose of this process is to help us to connect in a way that makes natural giving possible. Natural giving possible. What do I mean by natural giving? Let me do you a song to make it clear what I mean by natural giving. I never feel more given to than when you take from me. When you understand the joy I feel caring for you, and you know my giving isn't done to put you in my debt, but because I want to live the love I feel for you. To receive with grace may be the greatest giving. There's no way that I can separate the two. When you give to me, I give you my receiving. And when you take from me, I feel so given to. You all know that giving. You know how to do it. And that's what I'm interested in. Remembering to stay with that quality of giving, moment by moment in any connection. But we also all know that it's easy to lose it. It's easy to lose that connection, so that instead of enjoying that quality of giving, which is possible every moment in every contact we have, in spite of how precious that is, we forget. And instead of playing the game that that song is about, which I call Making Life Wonderful, it's the most fun game I've ever heard. Instead, much of the time we play another game called Who's Right? Have you ever played that game? See? It's a game where everybody loses. So isn't this amazing that we all know about this quality of giving that the song was about? It's possible every moment. We find that the richest thing to do, and much of our life we end up playing Who's Right? Now, the game of Who's Right involves two of the most devious things human beings have ever come upon. One, punishment. See, because if you're wrong in the game of Who's Right, then you deserve to suffer. Can you imagine a more diabolical concept to educate people? So, if you haven't already abstained from punishment, I'm sure by the end of the day that will no longer be a part of your consciousness. No more punishment. You won't do it in your families. We'll get rid of it with criminals. It just makes things more violent. We'll find other ways to deal with other nations beside punishment. No more punishment. No more reward. It's the same game. See, it's part of the game of Who's Right. If you're right, then you get rewarded. If you're wrong, you get punished. No more. No more. It's created enough violence on the planet. No more guilt induction. See? No more shame. No more concepts of duty and obligation. Just what the song is about. Natural giving.
internet-based self-organizing systems. So here are my 4 sentences then. Remoteness affects the quality of education. Educational technology should be introduced into remote areas first and other areas later. Values are acquired. Doctrine and dogma are imposed. The two opposing mechanisms. And learning is most likely a self-organizing system. If you put all the 4 together, then it gives, according to me, it gives us a goal, a vision for educational technology. And educational technology and pedagogy that is digital, automatic, fault-tolerant, minimally invasive, connected, and self-organized. As educationists, we've never asked for technology, we keep borrowing it. PowerPoint is supposed to be considered a great educational technology, but it was not meant for education, it was meant for making boardroom presentations. We borrowed it. Video conferencing, the personal computer itself. I think it's time that educationists made their own specs. And I have such a set of specs. This is a brief look at that. And such a set of specs should produce technology to address remoteness, values, and violence. So I thought I'd give it a name. Why don't we call it out-doctrination? And could this be a goal for educational technology in the future? So I want to leave that as a thought with you. Thank you.
The good news about all this is that the scientists who've been studying motivation have given us this new approach. It's an approach built much more around intrinsic motivation, around the desire to do things because they matter, because we like it, because they're interesting, because they're part of something important. And to my mind, that new operating system for our businesses revolves around 3 elements: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Autonomy, the urge to direct our own lives. Mastery, the desire to get better and better at something that matters. And purpose, the yearning to do what we do in the service of something larger than ourselves. These are the building blocks of an entirely new operating system for our businesses. I want to talk today only about autonomy. In 20th century, we came up with this idea of management. Management did not emanate from nature. Okay? Management is it's not a tree, it's a television set. Okay? Somebody invented it. And it doesn't mean it's going to work forever. Management is great. Traditional notions of management are great if you want compliance. But if you want engagement, self-direction works better. Let me give you some examples of some kind of radical notions of self-direction. And what this means, you don't see a lot of it, but you see the first stirrings of something really interesting going on. Because what it means is, it means paying people adequately and fairly, absolutely. Getting the issue of money off the table, and then giving people lots of autonomy. Let me give you some examples. How many of you have heard of the company Atlassian? Okay, looks like less than half. Atlassian is an Australian software company, and they do something incredibly cool. A few times a year, they tell their engineers, go for the next 24 hours and work on anything you want. As long as it's not part of your regular job. Work on anything you want. So the engineers use this time to come up with a cool patch of code, to come up with an elegant hack. Then they present all of these stuff that they've developed to their teammates, to the rest of the company, in this wild and woolly all-hands meeting at the end of the day. And then, being Australians, everybody has a beer. They call them FedEx days. Why? Because you have to deliver something overnight. It's not bad. It's a huge trademark violation, but it's pretty clever. That one day of intense autonomy has produced a whole array of software fixes that might never have existed. And it's worked so well that Atlassian has taken it to the next level with 20% time, done famously at Google, where engineers can spend 20% of their time working on anything they want. They have autonomy over their time, their task, their team, their technique. Okay? Radical amounts of autonomy. And at Google, as many of you know, about half of the new products in a typical year are birthed during that 20% time. Things like Gmail, Orchid, Google News. Let me give you an even more radical example of it. Something called the results-only work environment, the ROW. Created by 2 American consultants in place at about a dozen companies around North America. In a row, people don't have schedules. They show up when they want. They don't have to be in the office at a certain time or any time. They just have to get their work done. How they do it, when they do it, where they do it is totally up to them. Meetings in these kinds of environments are optional. What happens? Almost across the board. Productivity goes up, worker engagement goes up, worker satisfaction goes up, turnover goes down. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose. These are the building blocks of a new way of doing things. Now, some of you might look at this and say, that sounds nice, but it's utopian. And I say, nope. I have proof. In the mid-1990s, Microsoft started an encyclopedia called Encarta. They had deployed all the right incentives. All the right incentives. They paid professionals to write and edit thousands of articles. Well-compensated managers oversaw the whole thing to make sure it came in on budget and on time. A few years later, another encyclopedia got started. Different model, right? Do it for fun. No one gets paid a cent or a euro or a yen. Do it because you like to do it. Now, if you had, just 10 years ago, if you had gone to an economist anywhere and said, hey, I got these two different models for creating an encyclopedia. If they went head-to-head, who would win? 10 years ago, you could not have found a single sober economist anywhere on planet Earth who would have predicted the Wikipedia model. This is the titanic battle between these two approaches. This is the Ali Frazier of motivation, right? This is the thriller in Manila, all right? Intrinsic motivators versus extrinsic motivators. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose versus carrots and sticks. And who wins? Intrinsic motivation, autonomy, mastery, and purpose in a knockout. Let me wrap up. There's a mismatch between what science knows and what business does, and here's what science knows. 1, those 20th century rewards, those motivators we think are the natural part of business, do work, but only in a surprisingly narrow band of circumstances. 2, those if-then rewards often destroy creativity. 3, the secret to high performance isn't rewards and punishments, but that unseen intrinsic drive, the drive to do things for their own sake, the drive to do things because they matter. And here's the best part. Here's the best part. We already know this. The science confirms what we know in our hearts. So, if we repair this mismatch between what science knows and what business does, if we bring our motivation, notions of motivation into the 21st century, if we get past this lazy, dangerous ideology of carrots and sticks, we can strengthen our businesses, we can solve a lot of those candle problems, and maybe, we can change the world. I rest my case.
So I wanted to tell that story. So we'll talk about the second circle. About 30 years ago, when I started to teach, I became very upset with a lot of the teachers I worked with because they would say things to me like, oh, he's got it, she hasn't. And that upset me because, as I said, I'm stubborn, and I was also taught with a lot of cruelty, so I don't like cruelty. It's funny that, isn't it? At the centre of every Shakespeare play is a central message that we must not misuse our power. And I've seen more people doing Shakespeare misuse their power over others. Now that's interesting. I'm getting controversial, aren't I? Any case, I was doing this work, and I started to think, well, I actually can see that person has got it, and that person has it sometimes, and then they don't have it. And at the same time as teaching in drama schools and professional actors, I was teaching in 2 top security prisons. And what was very clear to me is that every prisoner I was teaching had it. Because in order to survive in the prison, they had to be present. They might have got very good at hiding it, but you never saw one of them relax. In fact, some of them said to me, we can never sleep because we're always having to be present. So as developed this work, I started to believe that we had 3 circles of energy, that we worked within 3 circles of energy. Now let's get this very clear. We need all 3. We can move very rapidly between the 3. We can be very good physically in a circle and not very good in another way. If I divide us into, you know, the physical, the intellectual, the emotional, and the spiritual. But a great performer is in one circle all the time, and that's called the second circle. But this is what I discovered, and I'm going to start doing this work, and eventually I'm going to ask some of you to do it with me, if that's all right. Is that terrible? I won't pounce on anyone, you know. I'm not going to do that awful. First circle energy is energy that falls back into you, often in the body. And I'm going to talk about the body, the breath, the voice, the ability to hear, listen, the ability to feel, the ability to think in these circles. But first circle, here we go. And actually, it goes into the voice. You can say anything to anybody in first circle, because the voice falls back. You can say, you know, do you know I really love you? Because actually, first circle is to yourself. It's absolutely to yourself. It's of the past. Does that make any sense? It's of the past. You know, we know we're in for not a very interesting evening in the theatre. I actually don't know how actors rehearse on the rehearsal room floor in first circle, but a lot of them do. You know? It's inwards. It's connected in there. I'm going to go into second in a moment, but on the other side of second circle is third circle. Are you following this? Do you want to talk to me? You'll tell me if it doesn't make any sense, won't you? Talk to me. Yes. Yes. On the other side of first circle is third. This is the generalized energy that's pushed out. The people who take your space. Do you know those people? Takes the oxygen out of the room. It's often in the body, the chest is up. Voices that are too loud. Have you noticed how so many Shakespeare productions, they're just all in third? Shouting at each other. My liege! The horse awaits! A third circle, though, is very dangerous because it seems like it's energized, you know? The energy's going out. It's of the future. Does that make any sense? You're pushing out. It's very controlling. We sometimes need third circle energy. We sometimes need first circle energy. But this amazing thing of being present, which is an exchange of energy between two people, that the focus is absolutely on something. It could be a human being, it could be playing with a toy, it could be listening to music, it could be reading a book in second circle, so you're connected to it and it's connected to you. It's the give and the take of being present. And by the way, we are born in second circle. We're born there. Every child comes onto the planet alert. It is the circle of survival. You cannot survive unless you come into second circle. Is that right? I mean, that's why when you're drunk, it's very hard to survive. I say that because I had a very interesting experience with a Kalahari bushman. That came off the wall, didn't it? If you ever walk through the bush, you're in second circle. And by the way, I think the nature of Shakespeare heightened is that they're all in second circle. I mean, I'm too old to be rigid. You know, I actually, when I did Richard II with Ralph Fiennes, we decided that he didn't have to be in second until he realizes he's under threat. Because actually, I'll talk about first circle a bit more, but are you with me? So the Kalahari bushman, I just, you know, because there's me and I ask questions, And I said, does a lion ever get you lot? Because actually, if you go into the bush, you hear stories of, you know, tourists being eaten, you know? And he just looked at me and he said, only when we're drunk. So, second circle, survival. It is the circle of energy of absolute intimacy. You cannot be intimate. I always say this is very trivial. Sorry, I go from the profound to the absolute trivial. If you want to seduce somebody, take them out to a restaurant and be in second circle with them. Just be with them. Here we go, all over the planet. You talk about Shakespeare, and the first line people say to you is, to be or not to be? That is the question. And actually, that is the question that I'm asking, and that I'm actually writing about in the second circle. Are we present or not? Hamlet could just have another gin and tonic and not face, do you know? The choice in life to come back to our presence. Of course, life is going to batter it out of us. It batters it out of children. I remember teaching in very tough schools, and a child would go away for the weekend, absolutely present, and come back the next Monday, and you'd lost something of them, you know? To be in second circle is this continual sense of being present. And if we lose it, knowing how to come back. Actors over the weekend said to me, well, you know, when I go for an audition, everybody on the panel is in first circle, is that right? Well, not always. But it's a choice, isn't it? It's a choice not to bully them into third, because it doesn't work. Third circle doesn't work. It's got a superficial energy, but to stay present. It is the circle of equality. Once we're in second circle together, we are equal. Some people don't want to go into second circle because they feel the victimhood of first, yes? Or the controlling superiority of third. Now, I think we're losing this. I think that as we lose it as a community, as a society, we get lonelier and lonelier. Do you know that sad picture in restaurants with a couple sitting there, both in first? How many people have said to me, I'm in a room with somebody and alone? To continually connect back to our presence.
Everything I do, and everything I do professionally, my life has been shaped by 7 years of work as a young man in Africa. From 1971 to 1977, I look young, but I'm not. I worked in Zambia, Kenya, Ivory Coast, Algeria, Somalia, in projects of technical cooperation with African countries. I worked for an Italian NGO. And every single project that we set up in Africa failed. And I was distraught. I thought, age 21, that we Italians were good people and we were doing good work in Africa. Instead, everything we touched, we killed. Our first project, the one that has inspired my first book, Ripples from the Zambezi, was a project where we Italians decided to teach Zambian people how to grow food. So we arrived there with Italian seeds in southern Zambia, in this absolutely magnificent valley, going down to the Zambezi River, and we taught the local people how to grow Italian tomatoes and zucchini. And of course, the local people had absolutely no interest in doing that, so we paid them to come and work, and sometimes they would show up. And we were amazed that the local people in such fertile valley would not have any agriculture. But instead of asking them how come they were not growing anything, we simply said, thank God we're here. Just in the nick of time to save the Zambian people from starvation. And of course, everything in Africa grew beautifully, and we had these magnificent tomatoes. In Italy, a tomato would grow to this size, in Zambia to this size. And we could not believe. And we were telling the Zambians, look how easy agriculture is. When the tomatoes were nice and ripe and red, overnight, some 200 hippos came out from the river and they ate everything. And we said to the Zambians, my God, the hippos! And the Zambia said, yes, that's why we have no agriculture here. Why didn't you tell us? You never asked. I thought it was only us Italians blundering around Africa, but then I saw what the Americans were doing, what the English were doing, what the French were doing, and after seeing what they were doing, I became quite proud of our project in Zambia, because you see, at least we fed the hippos. You should see the rubbish. You should see the rubbish that we have bestowed on unsuspecting African people. You want to read the book? Read Dead Aid by Dambisa Moyo, Zambian woman economist. The book was published in 2009. We, Western donor country, have given the African continent $2 trillion American in the last 50 years. I'm not going to tell you the damage that the money has done. Just go and read her book. Read it from an African woman, the damage that we have done. We Western people are imperialists, colonialists, and missionaries. And there are only two ways we deal with people. We either patronize them or we are paternalistic. The two words come from the Latin root pater, which means father. But they mean two different things. Paternalistic, I treat anybody from a different culture as if they were my children. I love you so much. Patronizing, I treat everybody from another culture as if they were my servants. That's why the white people in Africa are called Bwana, boss. I was given a slap in the face reading a book, Small is Beautiful, written by Schumacher, who said, above all in economic development, if people do not wish to be helped, leave them alone. This should be the first principle of aid. The first principle of aid is respect. This morning, the gentleman who opened this conference lay a stick on the floor and said, can you imagine a city that is not neocolonial? I decided when I was 27 years old to only respond to people. And I invented a system called enterprise facilitation, where you never initiate anything, you never motivate anybody, but you become a servant of the local passion, the servant of local people who have a dream to become a better person. So what you do, you shut up, you never arrive in a community with any ideas, and you sit with the local people. We don't work from offices. We meet at the cafe, we meet at the pub, we have zero infrastructure. And what we do, we become friends. And we find out what that person wants to do. The most important thing is passion. You can give somebody an idea. If that person doesn't want to do it, what are you going to do? The passion that the person has for her own growth is the most important thing. The passion that that man has for his own personal growth is the most important thing. And then we help them to go and find the knowledge, because nobody in the world can succeed alone. The person with the idea may not have the knowledge, but the knowledge is available. So years and years ago, I had this idea: why don't we, for once, instead of arriving in a community to tell people what to do, why don't, for once, listen to them, but not in community meetings? Let me tell you a secret. There is a problem with community meetings. Entrepreneurs never come. And they never tell you in a public meeting what they want to do with their own money, what opportunity they have identified. So planning has this blind spot. The smartest people in your community, you don't even know, because they don't come to your public meetings. What we do, we work one-on-one. And to work one-on-one, you have to create a social infrastructure that doesn't exist. You have to create a new profession. The profession is the family doctor of enterprise, the family doctor of business, who sits with you in your house, at your kitchen table, at the cafe, and helps you find the resources to transform your passion into a way to make a living. I started this as a tryout in Esperance, in Western Australia. I was doing a PhD at the time, trying to go away from this patronizing bullshit that we arrive and tell you what to do. And so what I did in Esperance that first year was to just walk the streets. And in 3 days, I had my first client. And I helped this first guy who was smoking fish from a garage, was a Maori guy. And I helped him to sell to the restaurant in Perth, to get organized. And then the fisherman came to me to say, "You the guy who helped Maori, can you help us?" And I helped these 5 fishermen to work together and get this beautiful tuna, not to the cannery in Albany for 60 cents a kilo, but we find a way to take the fish for sushi to Japan for $15 a kilo. And the farmers came to talk to me, say, "Hey, you help them, can you help us?" In a year, I had 27 projects going on, and the government came to see me to say, "How can you do that? How can you do?" And I said, "I do something very, very, very difficult. I shut up and listen to them." So the government says, "Do it again." We've done it in 300 communities around the world. We have helped to start 40,000 businesses. There is a new generation of entrepreneurs who are dying of solitude. Peter Drucker, one of the greatest management consultants in history, died aged 96 a few years ago. Peter Drucker was a professor of philosophy before becoming involved in business. And this is what Peter Drucker says: planning is actually incompatible with an entrepreneurial society and economy. Planning is the kiss of death of entrepreneurship. So now you're rebuilding Christ Church without knowing what the smartest people in Christ Church want to do with their own money and their own energy. You have to learn how to get these people to come and talk to you. You have to offer them confidentiality, privacy. You have to be fantastic at helping them. And then they will come, and they will come in droves. In a community of 10,000 people, we get 200 clients. Can you imagine in a community of 400,000 people, the intelligence and the passion? Which presentation have you uploaded the most this morning? Local, passionate people. That's who you have uploaded. So what I'm saying is that entrepreneurship is where it's at. We are at the end of the first industrial revolution, non-renewable fossil fuels, manufacturing, and all of a sudden, we have systems which are not sustainable. The internal combustion engine is not sustainable. Freon way of maintaining things is not sustainable. What we have to look at is at how we feed, cure, educate, transport, communicate for 7 billion people in a sustainable way. The technologies do not exist to do that. Who is going to invent the technology for the green revolution? Universities, forget about it. Government, forget about it. Would be entrepreneurs, and they're doing it now. There's a lovely story that I read in a futurist magazine many, many years ago. There was a group of experts who were invited to discuss the future of the city of New York in 1860. And in 1860, this group of people came together, and they all speculated about what would happen to the city of New York in 100 years. And the conclusion was unanimous. The city of New York would not exist in 100 years. Why? Because they look at the curve and say, if the population keeps growing at this rate, to move the population of New York around, they would have needed 6 million horses. And the manure created by 6 million horses would be impossible to deal with. They were already drowning in manure. So 1860, they are seeing this dirty technology that is going to choke the life out of New York. So what happens in 40 years' time, in year 1900, in the United States of America, there were 1,001 car manufacturing companies. 1,001. The idea of finding a different technology had absolutely taken over. And there were tiny, tiny little factories in backwaters, Dearborn, Michigan, Henry Ford. However, there is a secret to work with entrepreneurs. First, you have to offer them confidentiality, otherwise they don't come and talk to you. Then you have to offer them absolute dedicated, impassionate service to them. And then you have to tell them the truth about entrepreneurship. The smallest company, the biggest company, has to be capable of doing 3 things beautifully. The product that you want to sell has to be fantastic. You have to have fantastic marketing. And you have tremendous financial management. Guess what? We have never met a single human being in the world who can make it, sell it, and look after the money. Doesn't exist. This person has never been born. We've done the research, and we have looked at the 100 iconic companies of the world: Carnegie, Westinghouse, Edison, Ford, all the new companies, Google, Yahoo. There's only one thing that all the successful companies in the world have in common. Only one. None was started by one person. Now we teach entrepreneurship to 16 years old in Northumberland, and we start the class by giving them the first 2 pages of Richard Branson's autobiography, and the task of the 16 years old is to underline in the first 2 pages of Richard Branson's autobiography how many times Richard uses the word I, and how many times he uses the word we. Never the word I and the word we, 32 times. He wasn't alone when he started. Nobody started a company alone. No one. So we can create a community where we have facilitators who come from a small business background, sitting in cafes, in bars, and are your dedicated buddies, who will go to you what somebody did for this gentleman who talked about, this epic. Somebody who will say to you, what do you need? What can you do? Can you make it? Okay, can you sell it? Can you look after the money? Oh, no, I cannot do this. Would you like me to find you somebody? We activate communities. We have groups of volunteers supporting the enterprise facilitator to help you to find resources and people. And we have discovered that the miracle of the intelligence of local people is such that you can change the culture and the economy of this community just by capturing the passion, the energy, and imagination of your own people. Thank you.